Corey said today, we did have a retreat that probably close to 75 or 80 of our members are at right now in St. Charles County. They decided to join them for church today because they have their retreat going on, and it goes all weekend, and they'll be going through the night as well. In fact, some of us came back today to be here to make sure that our children's ministry had full staff and that I could preach, and a media team get everything get it done today. And we're actually going back out there here in a little bit because we still have a full day of lessons and things like that. It's been a great time over there. They're looking through the names of God, and so all these different classes that they're doing over there. They have some speakers from Nashville and Florida and Alabama over there, and they're looking at all the different names of God like Yahweh and Adonai and El Shaddai, and they're kind of breaking them down. So the college kids and the high schoolers and some of our young adults are over there, and they're learning a lot, and it's a great experience. And lots of people from around the nation, kids as well, college kids, and it's really encouraging too, so it's a great time to be over there. Anybody that would like to go out there tonight is still more than welcome to go to those lessons that they're going to be doing tonight as well. But it does look a little not as full on a normal Sunday for you guys that are visiting with us, but sure enough, next week we will be back to full capacity. Speaking of different events that we have going on with our church, you guys got a bulletin today. There is an invite actually inside your guys' bulletin for our Super Bowl party. And normally what we've done in the past is we have small groups that have met individually in their homes for the Super Bowl party. So we kind of had like a Super Bowl party in every city. So if you're from Troy or Collinsville or Alton, Edwardsville, wherever you may be from, we try to host something in your hometown. But what we decided this year, and we've done this years ago, and actually a church that I used to go to did this a lot as well, is we thought it'd be a good year to bring the family back together and just have a giant bash. And so we decided to host one party here at the church building and use our giant screens to have the game going on and just take the whole foyer and just load it up with food and some tables for some board games if you're not really into the Super Bowl itself. We'll have some space for some board games, some trading card games. We'll have maybe even some tables with some TVs and some little video games. And then in here, we'll have the game going on, and we'll just have a great time. If you're just here for the commercials, all the commercials are great for the Super Bowl, the halftime show, whatever it may be. We're going to host it here, and it's a free event, and we're going to have a lot of food. And, we kind of do a potluck style, so if you want to bring something, you're more than welcome to. If you're in a small group, I'm sure they'll kind of let you know what you could bring so that we don't show up with just 1,000 desserts and no proteins, or vice versa. So, but yeah, we want to invite everyone to that. But the reason that we did these little printouts was we were hoping that you will hand this to somebody in your life, and that you might have a friend, a coworker, a family member that maybe they don't have plans for the Super Bowl, or maybe you normally do things with them and you'd like to bring them along with you this time for this. And so we'd hope for you guys to take the information down and then hand this off to somebody and kind of build a good environment for the Super Bowl for your friends and your families and things like that. We have some more things coming up too. Our marriage retreat is also coming up for our married couples. We really do prioritize, and value our marriages. In fact, that weekend I will actually not be preaching. We're going to do a pre-recorded sermon and have it up on the screen because my wife and I will be there. It goes the whole weekend. But we really do value our marriages. We do believe that God, and how I look at life and what I see in Scripture is that God outlines the priorities of your life in this way. He says God, family, ministry. And so I know a lot of churches a lot of times can push ministry above family sometimes and say, you got to be involved in church. You got to be involved in ministries. You got to be doing all these things for God because it's for God. And what we want to remember is that we can't have an influence in ministry unless our family's solid. We can't be a light to the world unless we have built something that people look at and say, that's solid, that's stable. And for that to happen, we need to take time to invest in those things that God has instituted, which is our family. And so my wife and I will be there. A lot of our married couples will be there. And if you're looking into that, let me know, or there's some things on our websites that can point you in the right direction for those things too. We have a lot of cool things coming up. We have a men's casino night. We'll talk about that at some point soon. But there's just a lot of things in the early stages of the year that we try to set in place for people to have opportunities to be able to do cool things, just do relational things, and just do things that you normally do out in the community in the first place. And so make sure that you guys are looking into those things, and let me know if you have any questions that you can't see on our social medias. Man, we got a good lesson today. And I almost was like, you know what? Maybe I should just get up here and ramble for a little bit and just like put this lesson in my back pocket till everybody's here, because they all really need to hear it, you know? But I was like, you know what? God has put us here for a reason. God has made the crowd the size that it is for a reason. And we do have technology that records these sermons for a reason. So anybody that's not here can go back and listen to this lesson. But God has put it on my heart to talk about these things today, because we've built a sermon series lately on the faithful God. And as you guys can see up on the screen, this is our church theme for the year, is faithful. We revealed this just a few weeks ago, and the theme verse for the year is Hebrews 10:23. Let us firmly hold to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who has promised is faithful. And so our whole goal this year is to remain faithful with God and to come closer to God and have more of a oneness with God, that we can trust God because of who he is. And so what we started this year was a sermon series that we started last week called The Faithful God. And our goal was to build a sermon series that kind of played off of our theme, to figure out how and why we can trust God completely. You know, any good salesman is going to try to sell you an item, and the way that they're going to sell it to you well is when you can understand that the item is worth the value that you want to invest in it. A bad salesman is going to try to trick you and persuade you into something that maybe you don't really need or that you don't really want, because they get something from it, right? And if you know anything about religion, anything about God and the Bible, is that we are in the persuading business. That is literally what Christians are, is that we are to persuade people that a life with God is better than a life without. That is the role of Christians, is to go into the world and find people who don't know God and persuade them and say, listen, what God has to offer you is so much better than you can find yourself on this earth. What God wants to do with your life, how God wants to transform your life, what Jesus did, if you knew these things, you would be convinced that this is a life that you would want to live. Now that's a good salesman, because what they're doing is not trying to trick you. They're not trying to hoodwink you. They're not trying to trap you. They are trying to reveal who God is and let you make the decision if it's better for your life or not. And that's what the sermon series has been designed to do, is I'm not going to try to trick you. I'm not going to try to hoodwink you. I'm going to try to reveal over the next few weeks the character of who God really is and what he stands for and what he's capable of. And that in itself, in the faithfulness that God is, should convince you to want to be in a relationship with him, should want you to lean in and trust him. And last week we talked about how God is faithful in his promises, that God is a God that when he makes a promise, he stands on business, right? He stands behind it and he delivers. Every promise that God has ever laid out in Scripture has always come to fruition. Every prophecy, everything that happened historically, it came to light. And if God is a God that it stands behind his promises, then when he promises a good life for us, he's going to deliver on it. That's a God that you can lean into and trust completely. Today, we're going to be talking about how God is faithful in our temptations and our trials. And that is a hard piece of our life to find faithfulness in when things aren't going so well, when things aren't going the greatest in our lives, and when we feel hardships and we feel the difficulties of life. How do we find stability? How do we find God? How do we see God in the midst of all of the things that feel so difficult, that feel like life is just not fair, or this is too much for me? God has put too much on my life, or Satan has convinced me that there's too much weight, and it just makes me want to break down. It makes me want to quit. It makes me just want to give up. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to look into how God stays the same in temptations and trials and how he is faithful to us in those temptations and trials, and figure out how maybe after today we can once again trust God that much more because of who he is and the characters that he presumes whenever we struggle. So the text we're going to look at today, and you guys have some notes in your guys' bulletins that you guys are more than welcome to follow along with, but the primary text that we're looking at is in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. And it says this, it says, no temptation, this is Paul talking, right? It says, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. Okay? And so we're going to break this verse down today and talk about how it says in the middle of that, and God is faithful. And he provides the faithfulness of who he is in his character through this verse for us in our struggles. So the first point we're going to look at today is that, number one, God is faithful to remind us that we are not alone. When you walk through struggles in life, whether it's an addiction, whether it's a habit, whether it's a hardship, whether it's just life has thrown a curveball at you and you feel like what you're struggling with, what you're going through, what you're dealing with, nobody else can understand. I felt that many times in my life. Whenever something has happened in my life that nobody understood. You know, I look at little, it wasn't little for me at that time, but you know, I grew up without a dad. My dad was an alcoholic. My dad wasn't in my life. And I would go to these, you know, I played a lot of sports, and I'd go to these teams, and I'd play on these teams, and I'd watch the other kids, and their dads would be in the crowds. And I felt as a kid that nobody understands me. Nobody sees the hardships that I have to deal with and that I have to work through. We grew up extremely poor. And there were times whenever I was a kid that, you know, we couldn't afford our electric bills. We literally, I remember times as a kid that I had to do homework by candlelight, or we didn't have showers in our house, we had bathtubs. And the water heater, we didn't pay the electric bill, so we didn't have hot water. And we would literally have to use like an electric stove because of the water heater not being able to work, because of the bill not getting paid, that we had to heat up water, or we had a gas stovetop. So instead of the electric being out, we used the gas stovetop, and we'd have to heat up water to put into the bathtub to have a hot bath. I remember all these different things that we did as a kid, and I watched my friends at school have name brand clothes on, you know, and they didn't struggle with the things I struggle with, and I looked at my life and I was like, nobody gets me. Nobody understands what I'm going through. Nobody feels how I feel. And as I got older, I had the same kind of things. I struggled with women whenever I was in high school and college, and I just felt like since there was a void of my dad not being there, I had to find something to plug that hole in my heart, and I tended to lean towards sports and women, and I looked at those things, and I was like, people don't get why I do what I do because of what I've had to walk and live through. Nobody understands me. Well, my encouragement today is for you to understand that God never meant for you to walk through any of those things that you think about alone. He wanted you to know from the very beginning that the things that you go through are not unique. You see, in this verse, right off the bat in 1 Corinthians 10, it says, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. So what Paul's saying is that these struggles, these temptations, these trials, these hardships that we walk through, it is not unique to you. You are not a special case. You are not a 1 in a million scenario. What you are walking through is common to man. You may have not met the person yet that has walked through what you've walked through, but people have walked through what you've walked through. And there are things in your life that people have experienced the same things. Because what God wants us to understand is when we can find commonalities with other people, and we can recognize that other people have had the same struggles, we can find companionship, and we can find community, and we can find support, and we can find help, and we can find healing. And Paul dismantles this whole concept that you are isolated because what you're going through, nobody else has went through. He doesn't want us to believe that isolation is a thing that we have to deal with in our temptations, because he reminds us that the believer's struggle is universal. We all struggle. And our struggles have different layers, they have different levels, they have different situations, they have different contexts. They do things differently to our hearts and to our minds. But the idea of struggling is so universal to all believers. And Paul wanted to make sure that that was known, because God's faithfulness includes reassuring us that we are not uniquely broken. We are not alone, and that our brokenness is so unique to us, because that is a vital piece of how God chooses to use us and work through us in our hardships, is for us to understand we are not alone. And we are not so uniquely broken that nobody else can understand us. And so maybe you haven't found that person or seen that person, but what you're going to understand today is that there was somebody. And that's in Hebrews 4 that we look at this next verse, verse 15, that it says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are. Yet he did not sin." Maybe circle that every way, and then circle that just as we are. Because what the author of Hebrews is communicating is that Jesus Christ himself was able to relate to us. That Jesus himself was able to come down and give us a relatability and work through and walk through the same things and the same temptations and the same struggles. And it may have not been the same practical sense of Jesus didn't have to deal with all the drama on Facebook. There wasn't Facebook back then. How does he understand what I'm walking through? Well, Jesus definitely understood the isolation. He understood the loneliness. He understood how Satan came to him and tempted him to do all these different things. He understood betrayal. He understood the hardships and the hurt of watching people walk away from him. He understood all of it. It just doesn't have the modern twist that Satan has used in our culture to have the same kind of specificness to it, but the same emotions. Jesus endured it all, just as we are. And what that can help us understand is that Jesus' empathy shows God's faithfulness in his presence and his understanding. See, we're never alone in temptation because Christ walked that same path. You're never alone in what you've experienced because we can't relate to God. Let's be honest, right? We can't relate to a supernatural, always encompassing, completely omniscient being that always has, always will, and will never not be. We can't relate to that. None of us can be like, I've always been. I am that I am. No. You am that you are because you came out of a womb sometime in your life, right? You are that you are because somebody else did something to create you. God has always been created. We can't ever relate to that. We can't relate to the power of being able to do the miraculous things. We can't part seas. We can't do these crazy things, these miracles that God has done because we are not God. And God is something, he's a completely different entity that we will never be able to relate to. And he knew that. So, he sent his son. He sent a man. He sent a human to this earth so that we could relate to him. So that we could see how we are to him. How we can relate to that. How we can watch Jesus' struggles. How we can watch those hardships. How we can watch the hurt and the aloneness and the isolation that Jesus went through and walked through, and yet he still found a way through it to give us an example of how to deal with things in our temptations. To the point that he loved us so much that he went to the cross for it. That he died on a cross, and that is the ultimate trial. For a man to sacrifice his life for us so that we would recognize that we are not alone in all of the hurts. He took on all of the hurts. He took on all of the pain. He took on all of the trials, all of the temptations, and he defeated them all. And he wanted us to recognize at that moment on the cross that that is a moment that we can look at Jesus and we can understand that we were never alone. We were never alone. And so what I want to do is I want to take communion now. I want to insert communion into the lesson right now and just let this be a moment that maybe you felt isolated in your life. Maybe you felt alone in your life. Maybe you felt like the things in your life that you have dealt with have been just yours and that you have been uniquely broken and you are a special case and nobody understands you. That this moment of communion, to recognize what Jesus did on the cross, was to help you understand that that is not true. That God has always been, and he sent his son to help connect with you, to recognize that you were never meant to walk this walk alone. You were never meant to walk this life alone. You were never meant to feel alone in the hardships, and that his love through his sacrifice shows that he is right here next to us in the hardest of times. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for sending Jesus. Like I said, I can't comprehend the life and who you are and what you are composed of. And you are the creator, God, and we are the creation. They can't understand each other. But God, you sent a son, you sent another man, and you modeled him, and you created him to be and look just like us. And you wanted him to walk this walk and to endure the same things we endure so that we could feel that we weren't alone and that we had an opportunity to get to see you and to get to see your power and to work through your power and put it into our lives. And thank you so much for sending an example for us to be able to look at in our lives and say, man, I'm not alone. And it's because of Jesus. And thank you for his sacrifice. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
This is my desire to honor you, Lord, with all my heart, I worship you. All I have within me, I'll give you praise. All that I adore is in you. Lord, I give you my heart.
Lord, I give you my heart.
I give you my soul. I live for you alone. Every breath that I take, every moment I'm awake. Lord, have your way in me. This is my desire to honor you, Lord, with all my
Lord, with all my heart,
I worship you. All that you have within me, I'll give you praise. All that I adore is in you. Lord, I give you my heart.
Lord, I
Give you my heart. I give you my soul. I live for
So the reality is, with that verse and that point, is that God is faithful not only in power, but in companionship. God is faithful to remind us we're not alone because he provides companionship with us in the hardships. That could be very convincing to somebody that says maybe I could lean into God if he's going to be here for me through the hard times, right? Our second point today is that God is faithful to set limits on what we face. So God is faithful not only to make sure we're not alone, but he gets to set the limits on what we face, right? And in 1 Corinthians 10, the very next sentence, it says, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. You see, God sets the limits, and he actively is governing the intensity of our temptation. We may not feel that, right? We may feel like God is not playing fair, and it's like, this is too much. I can't handle this. I can't do this. And it's, but that's the reality, is that God controls the intensity of the kind of temptations that we go through. And I think a lot about my kids and some of the things that they have had trials in their life on, right? And I put it in quotations because my kids are 10, 8, and 5 now. And their trials are not real trials. Like if you're a parent, you've ever had that moment when your kid got up to the top of like a water slide and they did not want to go down, right? And then the line started creating behind them because they're like, I can't. And I'm like, yes, you can. Like, just go down it, because you go down it once and you're going to be fine. You're going to go down it 100 more times after that. But you got to do it yourself. And they're like, I just can't do it. And all the kids behind them are like, just go. And they're like, I can't. Like, and they're like convinced in their mind that there is a mental wall that they cannot do this, right? But sure enough, the first time they go down, it's like done, right? It's easy stuff. Or like when my kids were little, like vegetables, for example, like that's a good one. Like Peyton, my oldest, she is a texture kid for sure, right? Any texture people in here with your foods that you're like, I can't eat certain things, right? I remember, broccoli being one of those things, and a lot of people, broccoli is a normal thing. And my daughter, I'd be like, you're gonna eat one piece. That's the rule in my house, is you try everything once, because number one, I cook it, so you're gonna eat what I cook you, and my food is good. If I'm gonna eat it, you're gonna eat it, right? So I'm like, you're gonna try this at least once, and you can never eat it again in your life. I don't care, but you're gonna try it once, right? And broccoli was on the table for the first time, I guess, with my kids. And Peyton is like, I can't do it. I'm gonna throw up. And then I'm like, put it in your mouth. And it's like the instant it touches her tongue, she's like, bleh. And I'm like, you didn't even taste it. You didn't even try to chew it. You didn't even do anything with it. I was like, so you're gonna do it again? No, I can't. I tried it. You said I had to try it. And I was like, you didn't try it. Like, you just thought you did. And in my head, I know this piece of broccoli is not going to kill my kid. Like, it's not going to make her throw up. It's not going to make her life completely ruined. But in her mind, she's like, if I do this, it is going to kill me, right? It is going to change everything. And this is a trial that I will not survive. Like, that's what she's convinced herself. And when we look at those things and how silly they are as a younger age, but you know that the person that is in authority, or the person that has put you in that position, I clearly know that my child is not going to die going down a water slide. She's not going to die eating a piece of broccoli. She's not going to die doing these things. But what I'm doing is I am setting the limitations on what my kids can and cannot do. I'm telling essentially my kids what I think they're capable of and what I don't think they're capable of. And for the parents who protect their kids from those things, being like, you don't need to eat that. That's your choice. You set limits on your kids that limit what they can and can't do because of what you think they can and can't do. But what God is doing is he's making sure that he is setting the level of temptation, because he is the one that controls, because he knows us, what we are and aren't capable of. It's just like a coach I coached a lot of sports growing up, right? It's just like a coach that makes that kid do 5 extra push-ups or run that one last lap or finish the last 5 minutes of a game when they're just gassed. And the kid is like, I can't, coach. I've given it my all. And the coach is like, you can do 5 more. You can do 1 more round. You can do 1 more thing because you have convinced yourself that you are done. But I know your limitations. I know what you can do. And when I can break your mental capacity in that wall of what you can endure and you can push through that, you will come back out on the other side feeling a completely different person. You will feel changed. You will feel like you are capable of handling so much more in your life because you needed somebody to push you through that. That is exactly how God works with us in our trials and our temptations. When he says that, he will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear because his faithfulness ensures that the trials that he puts in our lives never exceed his grace for us. That God will never put us in a scenario that says, you know what, I'm gonna test this person and they're not gonna be able to handle it and they're gonna leave me because of it. God does not do that. God does not put things in our lives and he makes the limit so much more that it's gonna crush us and want us to leave him and want us to not be around him because of the hardships that we have to endure. Now, Satan is pretty sneaky, right? And Satan will sneak into those trials and temptations and say, why would God do this to you? Why would God make you think that you could handle this? Why would God put this hardship in your life? Why would God make you, you know you can't handle this. You know you can't get through this. You should be upset with God. You should walk away from God. You should do your own thing. You should just run from this stuff because it is too hard for you. You can't do it. You are not capable. You can't do anything. But we know when God says, you're not going to be tempted beyond what you can bear. You know, in other scriptures, when God says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And God reassures us that these trials that we face, he is the one that sets limits. And he is the one that wants to convince us that we can handle so much more than we think we can. We are the little kid here, and God is the adult saying, this is silly. You can handle this. It's going to hurt. You're not going to like it at times. It's not going to be the greatest. But man, I'm giving this to you because what you're going to be when you come out of this, you are never going to think you could have ever been that type of person. And that is going to make you want to be closer to me because of what I can throw in your life and you can spit back out and you can be changed because you chose to persevere through that. Look what it says in Psalm 66, right? It says, for you, God tested us. God is the one, right? We want to say that Satan is scheming, right? No, God tests us. You refined us like silver. We went through fire and water, but you brought us to a place of abundance. You see, God allows this testing to happen, but he still chooses the outcome. But the reality is God's faithfulness does not mean the absence of hardship. It never has, and it never will. You'll never find scripture that says that, saying a relationship with God means you're not going to have a hard life. Like, it's just not there. But what you do see is when God says a relationship without God means you're going to have a harder life, right? There is no easy life. You know, there is no way to escape life and to just live life and just think it's so easygoing and that you get to control everything and everything goes your way. It's either you're going to have a hard life or you're going to have a harder life. That is what it is. I wish I had a better sermon today than saying that, right? That's not a convincing and encouraging thing to say, but God says that the hard life that he is going to give us, the life that's going to test us, it is going to refine us. That God gives us not only a hardship, but he limits those things because of his purposeful limitations. He sets the limits on what we endure. He sets the limits on what we have to go through, because it would be terrible to be a Christian and be like, God just makes life hard. It is what it is. Like, that would be a terrible faith to want to dive into, right? It is what it is. He makes life hard on us, and yeah, it's just life, you know. But no, he says, I make things hard. I test you. I give you trials. I give you temptations, but there is a purpose in it. And he says it's like refining silver. You see, metals are impure when they have collections of like little dusts and little things that have gotten inside of the metals. But whenever you refine a metal, a precious metal like a silver or gold or whatever it is, it melts down to get the impurities out, and then when it hardens back together, it is that much stronger. And that is what God is doing with us when he tests us and tempts us, and he does it for a purpose, is because he breaks us down in a way to get rid of those things that have just been bogging us down, those insecurities, those thoughts, those emotions, those feelings that Satan tugs at. And God puts us through these trials to work through those things so that the next time something happens in life and Satan's like, I know how to get you, you say, no, you don't, because God's worked through that with me. That's not going to work this time. I used to be insecure, but I found some confidence with God. I used to be pretty lustful and I wanted this, but God has built a self-control within me. I used to talk like this because I felt alone, and I wanted to feel involved and included, but God has been by my side, and I know I can have companionship despite what the world does to me. And God breaks those impurities out of our life through these trials and refines us and makes us stronger. And he does it with that purpose in mind. It's just like when your body breaks down whenever you lift weights. You know, when you think about somebody in a gym and they're trying to break a personal best when they're benching or they're doing a heavy squat and they're doing heavy weights to build muscle, you know, your muscle fibers, they break, right? And they have to break for stronger fibers to be built. Doesn't mean that they're lost. It doesn't mean that they die. They just break. And when they break, that's when the strengthening happens. And God does that. God will break us down. And God will make us vulnerable, and it will hurt. But just like a fine, precious metal, the minute it hits a flame, it's hot. But if you pull it out immediately, it will never have the opportunity to melt. Which means we have to endure the pain for an amount of time so that the refining process can happen. The pain never goes away. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about in this third point, is that God is faithful to provide a way forward. Not only does he set these limits, and he knows what we're capable of handling, but he's always going to provide a way forward. That verse ends with this because it says, but when you are tempted and when you are broken down and when you are feeling like you're like a melted metal, you know, and the hardships have hit you the heaviest and you're in the season of the storm. You know, somebody told me once that I will never forget that you will always be in one of three seasons of life. You will always be entering a storm, you will always either be in the storm, or you'll always be coming right out of the storm. Those are three seasons of life, and you are in one of those right now. You are in one of those three scenarios right now, and God knows it. And God is always conducting storms. He's always bringing storms into our lives. But what God, I think, is the most joyous about is the third piece, is bringing you out of the storm. But he knows you've got to start it and get into it and live in it for a little bit to bring you out of it. If you avoid storms, he can never pull you out of them, right? And it says there in 1 Corinthians 10, it says, but when you are tempted, but when you are in the storm, but when you are in the hardship, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. Now, don't read this verse the wrong way. Because what a lot of people want this verse to say is, but when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can escape it, or provide a way out so that you can end it, or provide a way out so that you don't have to do it. That's not what this verse is saying. And a lot of people might misconstrue that or change that, but it never says it's taking you out. It says it's providing a way out so that you can endure it. It almost sounds like it's contradicting itself, right? But what it's trying to say is that you're going to find the light in the storm, right? And so the whole idea of pulling you out of a storm to escape the storm, it's not like the clouds go away and the hardships go away and God pulls the ship out and you're safe. But what's happening, and what the imagery that you should probably be looking for here, is when you see the storm and you see the hardships, you can still see the sun, right? And you're still living in it, and it's still hard and it's still difficult, but you have your eyes locked on that sun. And you know at some point in your life, this stuff's going to go away, but your focus is redirected because you see the hope of what's going to happen in the middle of a storm. And, funny way to say it, because the sun that you're looking at should really be the Son of God, which is Jesus. When you can keep your mind fixed on Jesus in the midst of the hardships, the real Son, you can endure what God has put in your life in the first place. You see, the way out is more times than not endurance and not escape. The way out of the hardships of your life is to live through it, not run from it. Because a lot of you guys probably know, just like me, what happens when you run from your problems. They catch you pretty quick, right? They're much faster than you. And so when we try to run from things, we're not really dealing with them. We're hiding from them. And God doesn't want us to live a life that we feel like we're always hiding. What did he say to Adam in the garden? Why are you hiding? He said to his creation, why are you hiding? That's not how I created you. I didn't create you to be ashamed. I didn't create you to feel when you make mistakes that you can't come to me. I didn't create you to have these hardships that make you feel like I'm unavailable. Why are you hiding? Why are you running from your problems? You should come to me and trust me through those problems. You see, God's faithfulness equips us to remain obedient in those difficult times. Look what it says here in Isaiah 43. It says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. You see, God doesn't promise avoidance. He promises his presence. He promises to be with you in the middle of all of this stuff. And that faithfulness that he has means that he's going to walk with us through the hardship. I got a lot of analogies today, and another one I think about once again goes back to the gym, and you go back to that guy that's trying to set a personal best on a bench press, right? And he's got tons of weight on him, and he's on his back, and he is pushing that thing up. And when you got a lot of weight on you in a gym, you normally have a guy or two standing by you called spotters. And what the spotters are responsible for is they stand by the weights on the sides of the giant bar that you're holding, because it's got tons of weights on both sides, and they are there to make sure you don't die, right? They are there to make sure that the weight that you are using doesn't fall down and crush your neck, right, and just kill you instantly. They are there just to make sure that you are not going to die. But good spotters don't just make sure you don't die, but they're yelling at you and they're pushing you to do it. They're like, you got this. And the real good spotters will not grab that until they know that you're about to collapse, right? They almost wait for you to collapse, and then they take on the weight. They don't grab it while you still have pressure on it. And so the way I think about that, right, is that good spotters will keep pushing you, be like, you can do this. Just push it up. Like, just force it up. Like, you just got one more rep. Like, you can handle this. You can do this. And you're like, I can't. You start arching your back, and you're like trying to do everything, wiggling your feet, and just trying to, like, you're freaking out. But they're like, chill. Like, you can do it. You can do it, right? and they are pushing it, like they are helping you push it up through their encouragement, but they're like, it's got to be you. If we're the ones that help it up, it's not really you. You've got to get through this yourself. If you want to see what you're capable of, what you're truly capable of doing, you've got to do it yourself. God is like a spotter in our lives. And he knows the weight that he put on those bars. And he knows it's up to us to push through all those things. And he's going to hold that weight if it collapses. But what I really believe about God is that God knows that it will never collapse, that his idea of spotting us will never be necessary because he knows how much weight he gave us in the first place. But a lot of times we can break, and a lot of times we can fall short, and a lot of times Satan can convince us that it is too heavy, and God does catch us, and God does stay with us, and God does help us recover. But God's going to throw you right back on that bench once you're ready for it again. And God's going to put the weight right back on you. And he's going to say, this time you're not going to break. This time you're going to get through it. This time you're going to do it. And once again, I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to hold that weight. I'm going to make sure that if it does fall, you're not going to die again. But we're going to try it again. And we're going to keep going through these processes until you finally get to the place in your life where you can handle this. You know, I met a lot of people who struggle with a lot of addictions. And, you know, whether it's porn, whether it's alcohol, whether it's substance abuse, and they say, you know, I can't. They have a couple good weeks, and they relapse. Can't. A couple more good weeks, they relapse. And they try these habits, they try new things, they try different things, and it just keeps breaking. And God is still holding that weight, and he still catches it every single time. And what we always want to say is, I just want to be done with it. I just don't want to deal with it. I want to run from this. I just don't ever want to have to struggle with this. And what God is trying to get us to understand is that storm will always be a part of our life. There will always be a temptation. You know, I've said this to my wife, like I did struggle with women for some time in college, and I did watch a lot of porn whenever I was a kid, and it has messed with my brain. But the reality is that when you become a married man, you don't stop becoming attracted to every other woman. Like, there are still people in the world, there are still traps on social media, there are still all kinds of things that I know that there is a way that Satan can put that struggle in my life. And for people that have addictions with alcohol and gambling and substance abuse, and these things will always be a part of our lives. But what God is doing is he's refining us. And I'll tell you what, the things that I did in my struggles whenever I was in high school and college, I do not do as a married man anymore. But the temptation is still there. The thoughts that Satan wants to put in they still show up. But God has trained me to take those thoughts captive. God has trained my muscles and my brain and my soul to handle things in a completely different way, that I can overcome them. Say, Satan, you're going to throw some temptations at me, but I'm not going to, you got to find somewhere else now. Like I've strengthened myself through this. God has spotted me for so many times, and there were so many times I did fall short, and I did relapse, and I did go back into those things whenever I was a young kid, and it just felt like I could never beat it. And then God never stopped working through those things with me, and he built that. For some men, I know it takes 20, 30, 40 years. For some people to get out of the depression or to feel the anxiety, finally slowly start to slow. For the anger to just be internalized and find a place of peace with God. Like the habits that we struggle with, they are going to continue to present themselves, and we have to make a choice. You have to make a choice today. Am I going to continue to let God work with me, work through me, and spot me? But you have to convince yourself that God knows the amount of weight he has put into your life and what you are dealing with. He set that limit. And if he set that limit, he knows you more than you know you. And he knows you can overcome things that you don't think you can overcome. And that's the connection. That's the last point, is that we can endure these things faithfully because God remains faithfully present. He knows you more than you know you. He knows the limits more than you know your capabilities. And He is going to be present with you through the entire trial. And one day, you may not feel like it's possible, but one day you're going to be able to look at your life and you're going to say, God strengthened me. God worked through me. God worked through this temptation. He worked through this trial. He worked through this hardship. He worked through this addiction. And man, I am a changed person because of that. And if God can do that for me, I can remain faithful to Him. Because that's the faithfulness that God provides. He is a spotter. He is a coach. He is a mentor. He is somebody that will never leave your side, no matter how hard the storm. And so what I want to encourage you guys to do today is to respond to God in whatever capacity you can. That's why we have communication cards in our bulletins, is for you to take an opportunity to respond to that type of faithful God. If you're at a place in your life that you're looking at yourself and saying, man, I need that kind of God in my life. I need somebody that's not going to give up on me. Well, believe it or not, God has provided people to help point you to God to recognize how faithful that He is. And that's what we do here at the local church. Here at the Crossings Church, we choose to have a body of believers that are going to support and point every single person towards God and the faithfulness that He has for each and every person. And so maybe you just need some community in your life. And you're like, you know what? I don't have friends that do push me to be better. You know, what I've always said is look around the people that you hang out with, because that's what your limitations are. The people that you surround yourself with are what you are. You are what you eat, and you are who you spend time with. And the people that you spend your time with, I've met a lot of people that have been like, that's part of the problem, is all I do is I hang out with my coworkers, and they are some terrible people. Like they cuss, they drink, they smoke, they do all these things, and they're terrible to their wives, they're terrible to their lives, and they destroy things. And clearly that is not the support group that's going to be able to help you in a storm. And so maybe you need some small group, maybe check to know more about our small groups and finding community in your life. And you can take that light back to those people. And you can show people in the world that, I want to take that back, I don't think anybody's terrible, but that they can do terrible and live in terrible scenarios. That you can change the thoughts and the feelings of what you've been involved in, and you can take that back to hurt people and show them something different. Maybe you don't know enough about God, and you just need to get into the Bible and check that maybe you like a personal Bible study and get to know who God is and what He's dealing with and what you're committing to and what you're getting into whenever you choose to find a relationship with God. I'm not sure what it is for you today. I don't know what God is wanting for you or from you, but I do know that God is present, God is faithful, and this is a characteristic that is universal and will always be. And so if maybe you want to try to give God a chance, or you need to recommit to God and who He is through these trials and temptations, maybe we lost sight of that and we let Satan win for a little bit, today can be a day for you to respond to that. So I'm going to give you guys some time to fill out those communication cards. I hope that you guys will be able to hand off these to maybe some people in your life. Maybe hand out these flyers and these invites to people that maybe are going through a hard time. Maybe there's somebody in your life that you do know is kind of lonely, kind of isolated, been stuck in some addictions, had some hard times in their life, and maybe invite them into something like this to maybe get to know some people that could help them with those same things. But I'm going to give you guys some time to fill out those cards. I'm going to say a prayer. The worship team is going to come up, and then we'll dismiss for today. But I really do hope that you guys will keep coming back for this sermon series, and I promise that next week there will be more people here, unless I said something really wrong today, and then it'll be like the people that weren't here will be here, but you guys won't be here. So I'll have to convince them that maybe I said something wrong last week. I don't know, but we'll be back into our normal routine next week. But let's pray, and we'll have the worship team come up. God, thank you so much for your Son. Jesus is the example. You're the creator, but He is the model. And you were able to create something in your Son that gave us an opportunity to look at something that we could relate to, that look at something and say, he's not much different than me. He is a man just like me. He's created in your image, but he lived the same type of life I live. He had 24 hours in his day. God, you don't know time. Your time and the way you experience time is not the same way we experience time. You know the past, present, and future, and you live in all of it. But God, we live in 24 hours in a day. And you sent your son to do the same thing. He lives in the same 24 hours. He lived in that time. He lived in the same trials. He lived in the same temptations. And God, he's an incredible model and encouragement for us to be something different. And God, you did that so that you could show us how much you wanted us to not feel alone. And God, I pray that today we can look at our hardships, we can look at these things that we're dealing with that are difficult, and recognize that we're not alone, and that you have never given us anything that we can't bear.